You mentioned strength training at the start. How often are you strength training? And is that a year round or is that seasonal?
Yeah, it is seasonal for me. A lot of I talk a lot about strength training in my videos, and so I attract some people who are huge fans of strength training, and sometimes they get on me about not strength training all year long. But what I will say is that once the season really hits, it gets quite hard to actually maintain strength training all year, just because these gravel races, you got to taper into the race, so you don't want to have any soreness in your legs leading into the race, so you might not lift the week of the race. And then after the race, I mean, it's just all about trying to get out of that fatigue hole. Like
Yeah.
you might have raced for 7 or 8 hours, and it's not you're not going to feel good in 2 or 3 days, and you're certainly not going to feel good to go bust out some squats in 2 or 3 days. You could do it, but you might be in that hole for way longer than you should be.
I think the part the keyboard warriors miss is we need to be clear on what we're optimizing for. You're optimizing for performance.
Hmm.
So it doesn't make sense to throw in strength training when you're trying to recover, get the adaptation from a long race, recover, get ready for the next race. But if you're optimizing for health, for longevity, then maybe it does make sense. It most likely does make sense to continue that strength training all the way around. But a lot of us look at World Tour riders or we look at gravel pros and analyze your behavior and then think, well, that's what we should be doing. But I'm optimizing for something totally different than you are.
Hmm. Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, I think that when I eventually retire from pro racing, I will probably lift all year long, and I will probably also do a lot more upper body lifting than I currently do. I'm not saying I completely ignore my upper body, but when I go into the gym, my legs are my focus.
So when you're in the gym, are you optimizing for hypertrophy? Are you optimizing for max strength or something else?
The type of lifts that I do, people would call them optimizing for maximum strength. It's usually a low rep range, and I give myself plenty of rest between sets too. And the reason I do that, I'm open to the idea that a higher rep range could also be helpful. I'm not saying it's not, but the research that we currently have on weight training for cycling and the studies almost always show that strength training improves cycling performance. They're usually operating in a pretty low rep range. We're talking about under 10 reps.
Have you got tangible on the bike gains from strength training, or is it more about injury prevention, durability?
I would say it's about tangible gains in the amount of power you can produce. Uh, I can talk about my own experience. I usually don't talk about my own experience on my channel because I like to keep it very science based, and your own
Yeah.
experience is just an N of one. So, but if I talk about my own experience, I started strength training when I was 21 years old. So I didn't strength train at all as a teenager. And but even though I was a competitive cyclist as a teenager, I didn't strength train at all. I started at 21. That year that I went from 20 years old to 21, I made a massive jump in my fitness. And that could have been due to a lot of things. I mean, at 21 years old, you're still developing. So it's not unheard of to make massive jumps in fitness in the 20 to 23-year-old age range. But I will say that that year that I started strength training was a massive boost in performance for me. So take that with what it is.
Yeah, it is interesting. Look at, as you say, those N1 studies are sometimes interesting observationally, but rarely give us too much insight. Talking to the World Tour physiologists is interesting because everyone wants to know, well, show me the peer-reviewed data. But they don't care about peer-reviewed data. They care about the N01 when the
Hmm.
N01 is Primoz Roglic. So they don't
Yeah.
care about the effect of ketones on 200 double-blind participants. They care about, can we preserve a little bit of glycogen for Roglic in the last hour of a
Hmm.
Tour de France stage? When you're looking at coming out of one of these blocks and you're heading into an A priority race, you're heading into Unbound, Leadville, whatever it is, how are you tracking your taper? Are you using metrics, using training stress balance and trying to get it back close to a zero? Are you monitoring heart rate variability, subjective feelings?
Hmm. There was a while where I wore a Whoop strap, um, and I looked at heart rate variability. I actually don't wear a Whoop strap or measure heart rate variability anymore because I don't know. I found that the results that I got from it were inconsistent with how I actually felt. And as far as using training stress balance, I mean, I do use that. I try to make sure that I'm in probably positive 10 to positive 15 training stress balance for race day, sometimes positive 20, somewhere in there. But, you talk about using feeling and perceived exertion. I think that is what I use more than anything during a taper week. And my taper week is not set in stone. So let's say I've got a Saturday race and it's Monday. What I do in the next 5 days will pretty much be determined by how I feel in the morning and how I feel when I get on the bike. So if I wake up Monday and I'm smoked, I'll probably rest. If I wake up Tuesday and I'm smoked, I'll probably do an easy ride. If I wake up Wednesday and I feel like I'm ready to go, I'll probably do an interval session, not a full interval session, but a reduced interval session, just kind of more as openers. And I will even do those openers based on feel. That's probably the only time I do intervals based on feel, but I'll just ride hard and see how it feels. Not go too deep. I'd say probably go 90%, leave some in the tank. But that entire week is based off of feel. And I think there's an optimal level of fatigue going into a race. You actually don't want to be too fresh. You can be too fresh going into a race. And you can obviously be too fatigued. And I think there's an optimal level. And through experience, I know what optimally fatigued should feel like going into a race. So if it's Thursday or Friday and I feel like I'm too fresh or I'm too fatigued, I will change what I do on those days to try to get to that optimal level of fatigue by race day.
Yeah, that makes sense. I'm with you on the wearables. I play around with going back and forth, using them and not using them. It seems like, chatting with your John Wakefields, your Dan Lorangs, the top coaches, that like the trifecta seems to be that subjective analysis of how an athlete feels in themselves, the training peaks data, and then marrying that with a wearable and taking the three of those. I'm not sure if you're giving a weight to each of those. I would suggest that it's probably more weight to subjectively how you feel rather than the other two. But we could potentially be on the precipice of an exciting frontier with AI being able to analyze mass trials of training peak data and Whoop data over longer periods of time and give us recommendations on what optimum skin temperature, heart rate variability, sleep scores look like when you're performing at your best. I think we're getting some interesting stuff happening in that space.
Yeah. Yeah. So, what put me on to trying the Whoop in the first place was there is actually research. I believe that they had a study, and it's been a really long time since I've looked at the study, so I don't know who performed the study in it, and I don't know the exact details of it because I made this video probably 4 years ago at this point. But they had subjects do a pre-planned training plan, and then they had subjects do a training plan based on their HRV. So if their HRV was high, they would do intervals. If their HRV was medium, they would just do an endurance ride, and if their HRV was low, they would not do anything. It would be a recovery day. So whatever HRV they had in the morning, that dictated what they did that day. And it turned out that the group that trained based off of HRV outperformed the group that had a preset training plan.
That's
and I thought that was super interesting. Yeah, I was like, well, that could totally revolutionize training. And I guess what happened is that in practice, I just didn't find that to be the case with myself. There were days where I woke up, I was in the red, and I went out and I completely smashed my intervals. And I was like, well, it's a good thing I didn't listen to the Whoop. And then there were days where I'd wake up and I was in the green and I was just slogging on the bike. So, I don't know.
Yeah, it's even how I had Marco Altini, who's one of the pioneers in heart rate variability, on the podcast, and it's even the way some of the devices capture it, like Garmin or Whoop capture it. He academically objects to how that's captured. He's like, heart rate variability needs to be a moment in time where you're like, okay, I'm going to take my heart rate variability for the day now. and you're making sure you're not sneezing, you're not breathing, you're not coughing. It's a very specific formula you need to go through and taking the heart rate at that moment. The straps are taking it at random points during the night. And he's like, so you're getting a random snapshot that maybe doesn't represent even what that hour is like. It could be an anomaly inside that hour. So he just doesn't think it's there yet in terms of the capture. But you're balancing, like the way he advocates capturing it is he built an app out. I think it's called HRV for training, for numerical for training. But it's finger over the lens of your camera. And that's like, there's still some good data on that's the best way to do it, but it's massively inconvenient. So you're balancing convenience against maybe poorer data with the straps like Whoop and Garmin. I don't know where the answer on it lies.
I don't know if you've ever done this, but if you've ever worn a Whoop or one of the other HRV monitors, if you've ever woken up in the morning and had a certain HRV score and then gone back to bed for an hour or two, and then you wake up and you have a completely different HRV score. You could wake up and then you'd be, I don't know, in the red, and then you go back to bed for 2 hours, and now you're in the yellow, or maybe even in the green. There were a couple times where I did that, because sometimes when I wake up and I feel really tired and I feel like I didn't get a good night's sleep and I have nothing to do that morning, I will just go back to bed. And there were a couple times where I did that, and the second time I woke up, granted, they're taking into account the amount of sleep you get, I realize this, but there were a couple times where I did that where my HRV score was completely different on the second reading.
It's like you just keep going until you get an outcome you like. It's like that magic 8 ball. You're just shaking. It's like outcome so.
Yeah.
Transform your indoor cycling with Rouvy, the platform that brings real-world routes and augmented reality to your training. Whether you're preparing for a big event or you're just looking to explore, Rouvy lets you experience legendary rides like Alpe d'Huez and Passo de Stelvio from the comfort of your home. Rouvy's unique augmented reality technology uses real-life video and GPS data to create the most realistic cycling experience available. You'll feel every climb, descent, and turn with precise terrain replication, giving you an authentic outdoor ride indoors. Plus, with AR elements like avatars and banners, the ride really feels totally immersive and interactive. With over 1,500 routes and 25,000 kilometers, the world's most iconic cycling destinations, Rouvy is perfect for cyclists of all levels. Whether you want to enjoy scenic routes, participate in group rides, or push your limits with advanced training plans, Rouvy has you covered. Rouvy also offers flexible pricing, allowing you to pause your subscription or choose duo or group plans to share the experience. From exploring new places to serious training, Rouvy has something for every cyclist. Ready to ride the world? Visit rouvy.com and start your journey today.